Millionaire husband hated his pregnant wife and drove her away. 5 years later, she returned stronger with their child. Conrad Blackwood never wanted children, or at least, that was the rumor whispered among high society circles. Married to the soft-spoken Eloise Bennett, an accomplished artist with a heart of gold, Conrad's glittering billionaire life seemed too important to be burdened by domestic obligations. When Eloise became pregnant, everything fell apart. He accused her of trapping him, hurled cruel words that left her shattered, and finally drove her away with nothing but a suitcase. That was 5 years ago. Now, a mysterious businesswoman has returned to town, one who exudes confidence and moves with a grace that has everyone talking. By her side stands a bright-eyed child who calls her Mama, and the father, Conrad Blackwood. To the outside world, Conrad Blackwood personified success. Born into a modest family in North Carolina, he clawed his way to the top through unwavering ambition and a flair for risk-taking. By his early 30s, he was known as a financial prodigy who could transform even the most precarious startup into a thriving empire. Wealth followed, then power, and finally the adoration of a public fascinated by self-made millionaires. At a charity gala in Manhattan, Conrad encountered Eloise Bennett. She stood apart from the chatter of socialites, wearing a deep blue gown that accentuated her calm beauty. Instead of pandering for investment tips, she asked about his philanthropic passions. He found her refreshing a break from the usual crowd of sycophants. In the swirl of that star-studded night, they shared quiet laughter and discovered an unexpected compatibility. She was an artist who adored music and painting. He was a businessman enthralled by visionaries. Soon, headlines declared them the new power couple merging art and commerce. The wedding was a spectacle, an opulent ceremony at the Blackwood estate, with luminaries like Andrew Friedman of Friedman and Friedman Associates and Helena Wentworth, an influential society figure, filling the pews. The press lauded them as an inspiration, calling Eloise a modern muse for Conrad's unstoppable drive. Their honeymoon was spent yachting off the French Riviera, sipping champagne and whispering about the future. Yet beneath the shimmer of their union lay a fragile foundation. Conrad's empire demanded relentless travel. He hopped between New York, London, and Hong Kong. While he closed deals in high-rise boardrooms, Eloise created vibrant canvases in an empty mansion. She tried to adapt to his whirlwind lifestyle, accompanying him on a few business trips, but he seemed perpetually distracted. Their once deep conversations dwindled to brief phone calls, overshadowed by Conrad's urgent obligations. Loneliness settled into Eloise's heart. She missed the days of their courtship, when Conrad would hold her hand during museum visits and discuss his dreams late into the night. Now he returned from overseas exhausted and preoccupied, if he returned at all. The staff at the Blackwood estate greeted her kindly, but she realized she was just another ornament in a realm dedicated to growing fortunes and forging alliances. Then she discovered she was pregnant. Tentative excitement blossomed within her. Surely this news would bring them closer. She imagined Conrad's face lighting up with fatherly pride. But when she finally told him, in what was supposed to be a tender, private moment, his reaction was anything but joyous. He accused her of wanting to derail his ambitions, of trapping him into domestic obligations he never signed up for. His words stung worse than any physical blow. Eloise's attempts to calm him were met with icy disdain. The man who had once professed boundless love now looked at her with resentment. In one harrowing argument, he demanded she leave if she refused to terminate the pregnancy. Fearful and heartbroken, she packed her belongings and left the estate, tears blurring her final glimpse of the opulent foyer. No one knew how quickly a love story could curdle into a tragedy, yet for Eloise, that was the day her world was ripped away. And for Conrad, it was merely an inconvenient snag in his unstoppable climb to greater power and influence. Eloise found herself standing outside the Blackwood estate with just 2 suitcases, trembling from the confrontation that had unraveled everything she thought she knew. She clutched the edge of her coat, trying to steady her breaths. Rain started to fall, mingling with the tears on her cheeks. In her mind's eye, she still saw Conrad's face contorted with anger, his words echoing, "You never asked if I wanted a child." A nearby taxi driver, sensing her distress, offered to help load her luggage. She slid into the back seat, numb. "Where to?" he asked, but Eloise had no immediate answer. Her family lived across the country in Seattle, and traveling there felt like admitting complete defeat. In a shaky voice, she instructed the driver to head to the nearest upscale hotel. She wanted a quiet room where she could think. That night, Eloise stared at the stark white walls of her suite, her mind whirling with questions. She tried calling Conrad once more, hoping he might calm down, but his phone went straight to voicemail. The next morning, she found her bank account still intact. Conrad had not blocked her access. Perhaps it was an oversight, or perhaps he considered it hush money. Either way, Eloise decided she couldn't remain in Manhattan, surrounded by the reminders of her humiliation. She slipped out of the city, relocating to a small coastal town in Maine she had visited once during a summer art retreat. It felt remote, a perfect place to hide from paparazzi, or the high society gossip that might erupt if anyone realized she was pregnant. She rented a modest cottage near the water. Despite her heartbreak, Eloise resolved not to let despair define her next steps. She was carrying a life inside her, an innocent child who deserved a mother's love. At first, she struggled to adapt. She had no close friends in this quiet Maine town, and her belly swelled as weeks passed. She worried about paying for a baby's expenses, despite having some savings. Yet, as her pregnancy advanced, Eloise discovered a resilience she never knew she possessed. She sold a few of her paintings online, using her maiden name to avoid attention. Gradually, her vibrant art found a small but appreciative audience, enough to keep her afloat financially. Her loneliness was eased by a kind neighbor, Pauline Withers, an elderly widow who offered warm meals and gentle conversation. Pauline noticed Eloise's blossoming pregnancy and, with a maternal warmth, insisted on accompanying her to doctor appointments. Over herbal teas in Pauline's cozy kitchen, Eloise found a listening ear. Slowly, she shared the barest details that her marriage ended when her husband rejected the baby. Pauline never pressed for more. "You're stronger than you think," she said, patting Eloise's hand. "Life can be harsh, but sometimes heartbreak molds us into who we're meant to be." Eloise wasn't sure she believed that yet, but she clung to the hope that this child, her child, would be worth every tear she had shed. Months later, she went into labor on a crisp autumn morning. With Pauline's help, she delivered a baby girl in a nearby hospital. The doctors marveled at Eloise's calm determination, and when they placed the tiny infant in her arms, she felt a surge of fierce love. Amelia Bennett, she named her daughter, giving her Eloise's maiden name, no reference to the father who had cast them aside. In that moment, Eloise vowed to protect Amelia with every fiber of her being. Conrad Blackwood might have turned away, but Eloise would forge a future on her own terms, no matter how solitary or demanding it proved to be. Eloise's first year as a single mother tested her in ways she'd never experienced. Amelia needed constant care, and Eloise juggled the exhaustion of nighttime feedings with the struggle to earn a living. Sleep was scarce, and the demands of motherhood left her little time to dwell on Conrad's betrayal. In the quiet moments, however, the past would gnaw at her. She wondered if Conrad ever thought about the life he had rejected. But Amelia's bright eyes and tiny laughter acted as an anchor. She found unexpected solace watching her daughter giggle at the simplest wonders: a flickering candle, the ocean breeze ruffling her hair. That playful innocence reminded Eloise that her child deserved more than regret and bitterness. So she painted whenever Amelia napped, pouring her raw emotions onto canvas. Scenes of heartbreak mingled with glimpses of hope, swirling into pieces that spoke of loss but also resilience. Pauline continued to lend support, babysitting Amelia, while Eloise travelled to art fairs in nearby towns. Word spread about her intense, evocative artwork. Over time, she received commissions from small galleries. Slowly, her reputation grew beyond the sleepy Maine community. Some recognized her style from her earlier exhibitions back in Manhattan, but she remained discreet, signing only her first name or using E. Bennett. Still, finances were tight. Eloise resisted using more of Conrad's money than necessary. It felt tainted. She paid the bills with her painting income and a meager portion of the joint account, determined not to rely on his fortune. When Amelia turned 2, Eloise realized their small cottage was no longer big enough for her expanding studio. She began searching for better opportunities to showcase her art. A turning point came when an influential Boston gallery owner, Martin Rothschild, stumbled upon Eloise's work during a charity auction in Maine. Struck by the raw passion in her paintings, he offered her a spot in his upcoming gallery exhibition, a leap forward for any emerging artist. Nervous yet excited, Eloise accepted. The exhibition was a resounding success. Critics praised her distinctive blend of color and emotion, labeling her pieces stirring reflections of the human spirit. Martin, delighted by the response, introduced her to well-heeled clients who commissioned private works. Soon, Eloise's income soared beyond what she once dreamed possible. She no longer had to weigh every grocery purchase against her painting supplies. Throughout this whirlwind, Amelia thrived. The child, with her curly dark hair, had Eloise's gentle nature and an uncanny spark in her eyes that sometimes reminded Eloise of Conrad. Each time that flicker appeared, Eloise felt a pang, part sorrow, part acceptance, that Amelia had a father out there who had never met her. But she pushed that pain aside, focusing on building a stable life for her daughter. Within a few short years, Eloise emerged as a rising star in the New England art scene. She managed to buy a small home closer to Boston, complete with a sunlit studio, a perfect environment to nurture Amelia and her creative pursuits. Living under her maiden name, Eloise Bennett, gave her the freedom to craft a new identity far from the superficial society dinners where she once held Conrad's arm. But she knew deep down that her past with Conrad remained a dormant secret. A confrontation still loomed, and it seemed only a matter of time before fate or circumstance would draw them back into each other's orbit, especially now that Eloise was no longer the vulnerable figure he had dismissed. In the 5 years since Eloise disappeared, Conrad Blackwood soared to new financial heights. He orchestrated 2 colossal mergers and ventured into real estate developments in Asia. Media outlets hailed him as a visionary. He graced the covers of business magazines and commanded speaking engagements on entrepreneurship. Whenever a journalist asked about his personal life, he dodged with polished ease. Rumors swirled that his wife had left him, but no confirmed details surfaced. His corporate machine functioned too seamlessly to let scandal overshadow his successes. Yet behind the veneer of triumph, Conrad experienced moments of inexplicable emptiness. Late at night, in his penthouse overlooking Manhattan, he sometimes paused at the window, swirling a glass of whiskey, remembering fleeting flashes of Eloise, the softness of her voice, the warmth of her smile. He had never publicly acknowledged her departure. He told close associates they had grown apart and left it at that. Only a few high society insiders gossiped about Eloise's sudden disappearance, but with no official statement. The whispers faded. Conrad often rationalized that Eloise's pregnancy was a betrayal, a sabotage to his grand ambitions. He still harbored resentment, believing she'd intentionally withheld birth control or manipulated him. The idea of fatherhood, with its obligations and unpredictability, clashed with his rigid worldview. Yet, as years passed, seeds of doubt planted themselves in his mind. In quiet moments, a voice asked, "What if you made the wrong choice?" He rarely allowed that thought to linger. Instead, he busied himself with expansions and philanthropic endeavors. He became a patron of prestigious art galas, ironically sponsoring multiple up-and-coming artists in memory of Eloise's passion. Some nights, as he mingled at these events, a pang of longing hit him. He'd think he spotted her in the crowd. But every time, it was a stranger. The ache of regret never fully dissipated. Despite his outward success, Conrad's personal life remained barren. He dabbled in superficial relationships, model girlfriends, the occasional actress, but none lasted more than a few months. He refused to share his penthouse or his heart, guarding himself against any threat to his routine. Even his parents, once proud of his achievements, noticed a guarded edge in him. When they gently asked about grandchildren or a stable family life, he dismissed the topic. One evening, Andrew Friedman, Conrad's longtime mentor and a veteran investor, summoned him to dinner. Over an expensive bottle of red wine, Friedman expressed concern that Conrad was hitting a personal plateau. "Men like us, we thrive on success," Friedman mused, "but we also need meaning beyond the deals." Conrad bristled. He didn't appreciate Friedman's insinuation that something was amiss. He had wealth, influence, why wouldn't he be content? Still, Friedman's words stuck with him. Walking back to his car, Conrad spotted a mother cradling a toddler, the child's laughter echoing against skyscrapers. A pang tightened his chest. In that fleeting moment, he wondered if his child had grown somewhere far away. Living a life without him, he dismissed the notion as sentimentality. Eloise had her way, I had mine, he told himself, determined not to let past shadows derail his unstoppable momentum. But destinies often intersect again, especially when one forcibly tries to seal the past behind locked doors. For Conrad, the day of reckoning was drawing near, far closer than he could suspect. On a sunny afternoon in Boston, Eloise Bennett was finalizing the details for a collaborative art exhibit curated by Martin Rothschild's gallery. The show promised to be her most significant exposure, yet local press teased it as a must-see for art connoisseurs. At the same time, she had just received an invitation from a